Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We have done all we can. We have left nothing on the table.
We've offered a vision for a healthier and more sustainable British Columbia.
So what do you guys think? Are we going to turn North Van blue?
With Election Day less than 24 hours away, how BC's provincial party leaders are spending their final moments on the campaign trail. Plus,
we want to make sure that we have water. That's my biggest thing, is making sure that we're protected.
Why BC farmers are frustrated, agricultural issues are taking a backseat in the provincial election, and what that may mean for the future. Also,
because these projects take some time to be delivered after approval, that's why we need a steady stream of them coming online.
why some are concerned a major influx of new social housing in South Vancouver is facing delays, pushing the project years behind schedule. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Janella Hamilton. Saturday is Election Day here in BC, and party leaders are making their final pitches to voters. Katie DeRosa has more on how the leaders are spending the last day on the campaign trail.
It's the final day of BC's 28-day provincial election campaign, and the two main contenders for BC's next premier spent the day in cities around Metro Vancouver. BC NDP leader David Eby campaigned in ridings his party is aiming to hang on to, Coquitlam, North Vancouver, and Maple Ridge. Eby called for centrist voters to support him to defeat his conservative rivals.
Maybe you've never voted NDP in your entire life and you never even conceived that you might. This is the election. This is the time for us all to stick together.
BC Conservative leader John Rustad was in Vancouver's North Shore, where the party is hoping to make inroads. He says after 7 years of NDP rule, people are ready for change.
Everybody is pumped for change. So what do you guys think? Are we going to turn North Van blue? Are we going to turn British Columbia blue?
Some of the more unscripted parts of the NDP's campaign came when Eby visited two mosques in White Rock and Surrey. The goal was to take one last shot at the BC Conservatives for refusing to fire their candidate Brent Chapman over offensive statements he's made on social media about Muslims. However, Eby faced criticism of the NDP's approach to the war in Gaza.
So there's an ongoing genocide. When are we going to hear our local government voice their calling on Israel to stop the genocide, to cease fire?
Mr. Premier, I think you are shortening the conflict just 7th of October, 1 year until now, which is wrong totally. Historically, we have more than 75 years of conflict. And you and all the other politicians in the West, they should recognize.
Well, I actually do think, Hamas are terrorists, actually. I do think that. I think what they did on October 7th was really awful. So I'm sorry if we disagree on that.
Another member of the community pushed Eby to better address Islamophobia, but found common ground with him in denouncing Chapman, who in a 2015 Facebook post called Palestinians time bombs. Rustad has been unfazed by that controversy, and seemingly so have his supporters. More than 1,000 people cheered Rustad Thursday night at a rally in Surrey.
1 in 2 youth are thinking about leaving this province, and they're leaving because they don't have hope. They're leaving because they can't afford to be here. They're leaving because they want to be able to build a future, and they don't see that in British Columbia.
At a campaign event in Victoria, BC Green Party leader Sonia Furstenau says hers is the only party offering a long-term vision of hope.
And so what have we offered this election? We've offered a vision for a healthier and more sustainable British Columbia.
So where do the parties stand on the eve of final voting day? A Leger poll released Friday showed the NDP with 46% support and the BC Conservatives close behind at 42%. The BC Greens are sitting at 9% support. Polls close at 8 p.m. Saturday, and the results will start rolling in shortly after that. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Vancouver.
All three parties have made significant promises to help improve the delivery of health care in this province. Chad Pawson has more on how workers are reacting.
A new hospital under construction in Vancouver, a modern facility for healthcare and its delivery, getting access to treatment and having timely care, and simply being able to have a doctor to turn to are all top concerns in this election campaign. Just ask healthcare workers.
Really, it's about shortages and the challenges that are existing in hiring, retaining, and recruiting the staff that run these operations.
So when family doctors are not properly resourced or supported, it impacts the quality care that the patients receive.
Decisions made in the early 2000s in terms of not investing in nurses, not investing in nursing schools, and not investing in healthcare has really contributed to why we're in this situation right now.
Party platforms have pages and pages dedicated to healthcare, making it tough for voters to figure out what will make a difference. All the parties agree bold, creative solutions are needed. The NDP would continue pushing to train and retain more family doctors and nurse practitioners and connect them with the hundreds of thousands of people without them as quick as possible. The Conservatives want to increase care through a new model, one that delivers services through both public and private facilities, but universally funded by the province. Meanwhile, the Greens are promising a so-called dogwood model, 93 healthcare centres across the province to which people are directly connected for the majority of their healthcare needs. The bold plans and the platforms don't come cheap. Healthcare is the province's top expense, with nearly $33 billion committed to it in its current $89 billion budget. All three major parties have promised to increase spending, committing hundreds of millions of more dollars in an attempt to improve healthcare services. Still, that spending isn't guaranteed to produce results. Statistics show BC has struggled to reduce wait times. In 2021, nearly 90% of cancer patients got access to radiation therapy within benchmark timeframes, but that dropped in 2022 and even further in 2023. This as health spending increased. The BC NDP defends its work to improve health care and has been asking voters to allow it to continue with its initiatives, saying they are making a difference. The other two parties hope to tap into voter angst, something healthcare workers understand.
As voters, and I don't blame patients for this. If I'm in my community and I go to the emergency department because my son fell out of a tree and broke his arm and the emergency department is closed, I'm angry and I want change.
Mitchell and others say the last BC government has made progress and they want to keep going with the BC NDP. A group of Surrey doctors say as much in an open letter, writing they have found common ground and made significant progress and want to maintain momentum on a new hospital for Surrey, a new regional cancer centre, and more long-term beds, among other investments. Healthcare workers say promises and platforms are needed, but must come with the proper resources such as additional workers. Nurses want whomever forms the next government to guarantee newly established nurse-to-patient ratios in hospitals, which paves the way for the hiring of 8,000 more nurses. Both the NDP and Greens have so far agreed to this.
What we need to see to turn our healthcare system around is more policy solutions like minimum nurse-to-patient ratios. We need to do things that are going to ensure that patients get the care that they require and that the conditions of work are as such that nurses actually want to stay in the system.
Healthcare workers want voters to closely look at the party's platforms as they prepare to cast their ballots. In the meantime, they also say they're willing to work with whomever forms the next government, as long as there's no backing away from a problem that requires bold solutions and the resources to make a difference. Chad Pawson, CBC News, Vancouver.
While topics like healthcare, housing, and affordability have dominated the provincial election campaign, agriculture has received little airtime from the major parties in recent weeks. The CBC's Brady Strachan looks at why.
Oh, this one's going to be beautiful.
Janae Oliver pulls back the dry, dark husks on a cob of ornamental corn to reveal what's underneath.
Right? It's just each kernel is like a burst of sunshine.
Oliver's family has been farming these fields for more than 100 years, and they've been selling produce at Painter's Food Market for nearly as long. It's a thriving business that employs more than 50 workers during the peak season. This provincial election cycle, Oliver had hoped to hear more from parties about agriculture. To her, the one party that seemed to be championing the issue, BC United, dropped out of the race.
Agriculture is a huge part of BC, and let's make sure I know Kevin Falcon, when he was running, like I met him. He came to a group of farmers meeting, and he was like, I will be the guy that will stand for farmers. And I was like, oh, this is the guy. It's awesome. And then haven't heard any of the other leaders talk about it.
With party leaders promoting platforms on housing, healthcare, and affordability, some farmers worry agriculture has taken a back seat. However, important discussions have been taking place behind the scenes.
And BC Agriculture Council and our board went around across the province in the 4 to 6 weeks prior to now to connect with MLAs and candidates from all parties to share what the priorities are from the sector to ensure, regardless of what party forms government, that everyone is clear on what the sector priorities are.
Those priorities include the formation of a Premier's task force to develop a provincial agri-food competitiveness and growth strategy, protecting farmland from residential and industrial encroachment, and increased funding to the Ministry of Agriculture and Food to better support farmers and ranchers.
The Ministry of Agriculture budget, like I said, we're in dead last. And when we're talking about numbers here, we're talking about 2.5% of the sector GDP right now is reinvested back into the sector.
The red ones are Red Angus.
Brian Thomas's family has been ranching east of Okanagan Falls for several decades. The most important issue for him this election is securing water for agriculture.
If we didn't have water and the stored water and access to water, we wouldn't have a ranch here.
He wants the next provincial government to invest more in water storage so that during years of drought, ranchers are not cut off, a situation that happened just last summer.
Like what happened up in Falkland or Westwold, then it becomes an issue. So it's something that the government has to realize that, they just can't say, hey, you're not irrigating today,
That's why it's so easy to lose a fruit crop.
Janae Oliver agrees. As more and more people move to the Okanagan, she wants politicians to ensure that farmers get priority to this vital resource.
We want to make sure that we have water. That's my biggest thing, is making sure that we're protected.
Farms like this one are vital to the BC economy, growing food and employing people who live here. She hopes that's something that will remain constant in the Okanagan, regardless of which party wins this election. Brady Strachan, CBC News, West Kelowna.
Following a CBC report, the Canadian Lacrosse Hall of Fame has dropped a BC coach from its membership after he was convicted of assaulting a player.
Sport organizations are ready to start protecting those of us in the community who may have been vulnerable in the past, children and athletes that might be vulnerable in the future.
Rick Mang was inducted in 2017 as a former goaltender. Last week, he was sentenced to 18 months probation for assaulting a player in Port Coquitlam in 2022. The Hall of Fame says its board of directors unanimously voted to revoke his membership. CBC News has reached out to Mang and his lawyer for comment. The BC Lacrosse Association has suspended him from coaching until 2027. Darius Madavi joins us now with our first look at the weather. A little bit of a wet one. Is that going to be sticking around for the rest of the weekend, Darius?
Yes, definitely a wet one. Most of the rain comes tonight and through tomorrow. Probably the heaviest stuff before tomorrow afternoon. With that being said, this is a fairly strong atmospheric river. I'd say moderate to strong. One important thing to note is that, it's not targeting the same areas that the one did back in 2021. This is not going to be a repeat of that event. This one is probably going to be hardest felt on the north shore of Metro Vancouver in particular. On the west coast of the island, we've already seen very high rainfall accumulations, but again, not looking at a repeat of that situation. I really want to emphasize that. I know that a lot of people have said, it's just rain. We get rain this time of year. Yes, but it's also worth noting when that rain is going to be particularly hard, when we're going to see snow in much of the interior, when we're going to see those freezing levels come down, snow across the mountain passes. These are all what's going to be happening over the next few hours. So, worth noting. Rainfall warnings in place, wind warnings in place, snow warnings in place. So over the next few hours, just be ready, and we'll take a closer look at those accumulations later in the show.
Thanks so much, Darius.
Thank you.
There's no shortage of people in need of social housing in BC, but in South Vancouver, getting that housing built is taking longer than expected. That's next. A major influx of new social housing in South Vancouver may now be years behind schedule. Liam Britton has the story.
Council greenlit over 1,600 homes for the old bus barn on West 41st back in 2020. The developer at the time promised to build 175 units of social housing, a daycare, and a park by 2028. But now a new developer, Grosvenor, owns the site, and they're asking for a 5-year extension. Now, city staff are recommending that council grant this extension until 2031 or 2033, and they're citing the change in ownership 2 years ago, the fact that the last owner didn't really do much with this site, and the challenging economic conditions. In a statement, Grosvenor highlighted its, quote, long track record of proudly delivering meaningful amenities in all the communities in which we develop. In this instance, the overall development, including the market strata and rental, has experienced delays compared with what was assumed before our involvement. Unfortunately, those timelines were never feasible. This is due to the usual issues affecting our industry, market conditions, approval timelines, evolving government housing policies, and significant cost escalations across the board. A spokesperson adds they are facing delays with the entire project, not just the daycare park and social housing. But Green Councillor Pete Fry expressed disappointment with the delay of those amenities.
I am worried that this is a trend that we're seeing. We're seeing a shift away from the kind of delivery of social housing more towards how we can just deliver on more supply, but sacrificing a lot of those amenities that are really important.
The BC Nonprofit Housing Association says this Oak Ridge project is one of the bigger social housing projects in the works, but not the only one facing delays.
But what it reinforces for us is the need for that continued investment from virtually every level of government. Because these projects take some time to be delivered after approval, that's why we need a steady stream of them coming online.
Atke adds the project's phased build-out means the city will keep leverage to make sure the amenities get built along with the market housing. Council will consider the extension Tuesday. Liam Britton, CBC News, Vancouver.
A marketplace investigation has found many popular restaurant chains serving halal food have staff members who can't answer basic questions about it. Charles C. Agro explains.
You can see the meat glisten. Before food vloggers Mohammed and Sarah Arfan eat at a restaurant, they need to get a few questions answered about the halal food they're being served.
So what we're looking for is the meat halal? Can we see the certificate?
So when an establishment is not well informed, they can lose a customer that day. For meat, like chicken, beef, or lamb, to be considered halal, the animal must first be in good health and treated humanely. Then a prayer is recited before the animal is slaughtered by a Muslim, with a swift, deep cut across the throat. To see how well informed some of Canada's top fast food chains are about the halal they're selling, and whether we can trust the certificates they show us, Marketplace went undercover, visiting 2 KFC, Boston Pizza, Popeyes, Osmow's, and Mary Brown's locations across the Toronto area.
Is the restaurant certified halal? Yeah. The whole restaurant is? Yeah. Certified halal? Okay.
6 of the 10 locations said their entire restaurant is certified halal, when in fact, none of them are.
I would be very disappointed if I was the customer of that restaurant and having to find out that I am being misled.
Subadar says the certification system is often misused, and a restaurant should not claim to be certified unless each ingredient and meat source has been verified halal. While the Canadian Food Inspection Agency requires halal products be certified, the certifying bodies, and there are more than a dozen in Canada, are not regulated. Subadar is calling on the government to change that.
First and foremost, we need to decide what the standard is going to be. Everyone needs to be aligned with those standards. And then there should be periodic audits, just like there's audits for everything else, right?
The CFIA declined to talk to us, but says it's up to the certification bodies to ensure religious requirements are adhered to.
As for the restaurants, Osmow's tells us that it will reach out to its certifiers to learn more about the certification process. Mary Brown's tells us that they are committed to transparency. And Boston Pizza told us that its locations which offer halal menu items, well, they are required to complete online training. KFC and Popeyes did not respond to our requests for comment. Charles C. Agro, CBC News, Toronto.
We'll be right back. Stay with us. British Columbians smashed advanced voting records this week, and if you haven't cast your ballot yet, tomorrow's your last chance. We asked people in downtown Vancouver what their voting plans are and why they think it's important.
I've already done my voting. I did it day before yesterday.
Don't know yet. I know my girlfriend voted last night, so I was kind of pressured onto deciding who I'm going to vote for, but I'm having a hard time coming to a decision.
I feel it is important to get my vote in this time. It seems that all races are close.
And I tell people, if you don't vote, the person that you don't, or the party that you don't want to get in may get in.
I mean, it's really important because this is first of all, our democratic right. Not everyone gets that chance, but also it's important because the policies that our provincial government enacts impact our everyday life.
Join us tomorrow for CBC's live special election coverage featuring in-depth analysis and expert interviews. You can watch on all CBC platforms from 7 p.m. Pacific. Throughout this provincial election campaign, we've been checking in with CBC hosts across our province to see what voters in their regions are talking about. But this week, we're taking a look at what our election here might indicate when it comes to national politics. Joining me to get into this is Catherine Cullen, host of CBC's The Host. Catherine, thanks so much for being here today. I know we're very excited. Election Day is just hours away. With final voting day being here in BC, how significant is that from a national perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think this race is incredibly significant, right? BC doesn't just have a big population, it carries some real political heft in this country. And if you look at what the results could mean to the different federal parties, it's quite interesting. You have the federal NDP, they take a lot of pride in having an NDP government in British Columbia. I had another party describe this to me as sort of a crown jewel for the NDP, right? Because it shows people, even though the NDP haven't governed federally, they can do it on a provincial level. If you look at the Conservatives, this is an interesting moment right now, right? So much of the country provincially is blue. So this question of how much this appetite for change is going to sweep into British Columbia. As for the Liberals, a couple of indications here. Obviously, they're the national governing party. So if David Eby is on his way out, certainly that means that the Liberals would lose something of an ally, something of a like-minded government. At the same time, David Eby is facing the same kinds of headwinds to some extent that Justin Trudeau is, right? That anti-incumbent sentiment. So an interesting test to see how David Eby and the NDP are going to deal with that.
Absolutely. And what sort of overlap do you see between what's happening here in BC and federally?
Well, I think one really interesting thing to watch for people across the country is what's happening with the carbon tax, right? No surprise that the provincial Conservatives aren't interested, but the NDP backing away as well and saying that if the federal government were to remove that national backstop, that would be the end of the carbon tax here. That's a big deal, right? British Columbia, one of the first places in Canada, along with Quebec, to embrace carbon pricing. So I think it says something about what the attitude is across the country right now. And it's certainly, to some extent, a blow to Justin Trudeau, who continues to hold on to this policy despite all the headwinds he's facing. I'd say another important point of overlap has to do with some of what we're hearing from John Rustad, right? Axe the tax, drug dens, common sense. This is the language of Pierre Poilievre. They are ultimately different messengers, but there is, there's something of a copy-paste effect there. And I know there are going to be federal Conservatives watching what happens here in British Columbia to see what it says about the issues that are at the forefront and how much appetite for change there really is in the province right now.
Now, I know you're used to reporting from Ottawa, so being here in BC, what will you be keeping your eye on? It's a bit of a change of scenery for you.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many interesting things to watch tomorrow night. Certainly, I mean, you mentioned earlier the incredible advanced vote count, right? So does that mean, rising tide raises all boats? Are we just going to see better turnout overall? Is it just people looking ahead to the weather and sort of making different planning decisions? Are people going to turn out, and what does that tell us about what the result is going to be? Also, I've had people tell me, federally, provincially, it doesn't matter. Elections in this country right now are being won in the suburbs. So really looking at the map and seeing what lessons we can glean from that.
Wow. Well, lots to keep our eyes on. Thank you so much, Catherine Cullen, host of the House, rather. Thanks so much for joining us
today.
Thanks
for having me.
Every 10 years, important changes are made to BC's electoral districts because of population growth, resulting in new boundaries, new names, and sometimes a combination of the two. Benit Braich looks at some examples and what it means for you.
This election, as you're deciding who to vote for, you might also want to check where to vote. And that's because there's been some changes all around the province. So I checked in with Elections BC, and here's what's important to know. The overall number of ridings has increased by 6, from 87 to 93, mainly because of population growth. And many ridings have been redrawn or renamed, and some of them significantly to keep up with those changes. This happens once every 10 years. It's led by an independent commission, and then Elections BC puts it into action. All right, so starting in Vancouver, the ridings in the heart of the city look like this. After redistribution, Vancouver Little Mountain is new, with changes around it to Vancouver Yaletown and Vancouver South Granville. Now, if we move a little bit to the east, many ridings in this area have new names and new boundaries. So the new riding here straddles 2 cities. It's Burnaby, New Westminster. Created from portions of other ridings, including Burnaby South Metrotown, Burnaby East, and New Westminster Coquitlam. Moving now to Surrey, which picks up an additional seat and sees other big changes too. Surrey Serpentine River was created from parts of nearby districts like Surrey Cloverdale, Surrey Panorama, and Surrey Fleetwood. The boundaries have also reorganized for the newly named Surrey City Centre and Surrey North. And in Langley, 2 existing seats are now 3. Langley Walnut Grove has been carved out from the newly named Langley Willowbrook and Langley Abbotsford. Okay, let's get to Greater Victoria, and there's a new seat in the suburbs. Langford Highlands has been carved out, and the rest of that district is now Wandafuka Malahat. And in the interior, there's a new seat called Kelowna Centre. It's created from other districts including Kelowna Mission and the newly named and redrawn West Kelowna Peachland and Kelowna Lake Country Coldstream to the north. So yeah, with all these changes, you might be voting in a new riding. And if you want to see for yourself, here is a tool. Search mydistrict.elections.bc. Type in your address, and it will tell you your riding before you head to the ballot box. Benit Brach, CBC News, Vancouver.
A project called Student Vote is transforming classrooms into mock polling booths, allowing students to learn about voting and vote for local candidates.
The children are citizens, they're future citizens, and I tell them the parties are watching you. You vote in 8-10 years, but they're watching you because voters' interests have changed over time, and they play the long game. Parties play the long game. They are watching your every move, and also some of you know more than your parents.
Here's what the children had to say.
I care about healthcare because a lot of people in Vancouver are getting really sick because of it's winter and it's the season of getting flus and stuff. My main issue is usually economy and sometimes environment or healthcare. And I really care about a lot of crime.
Maple Grove Elementary is just one of the schools taking part in this. Their 250 votes will be sent to Student Vote, and results will come out early next week. Chiefs of the Assembly of First Nations said today they want changes made to a deal to reform the on-reserve child welfare system. The AFN rejected the federal government's $47.8 billion offer yesterday.
Draft resolution number 1 does not carry, so is defeated.
The AFN wants a new process with a new negotiating team. Today, it voted in favor of restarting negotiations with Ottawa to get an amended offer. The federal government must now decide whether to do that or make regional deals with groups that favored the most recent offer. Details have been revealed of a proposed settlement between tobacco companies, provinces, territories, and tens of thousands of Quebec smokers. The multi-billion-dollar deal was decades in the making. The CBC's Jennifer Yoon is in Montreal with the details.
$32 billion paid out by 3 major tobacco companies to smokers diagnosed with lung cancer, throat cancer, or emphysema, as well as provinces and territories to recover healthcare costs. If the proposed plan is accepted, it would be the biggest deal of its kind outside the United States.
When we started this case in 1998, not a single person in the world had received a single penny from a tobacco company in compensation. And as a result of this litigation, tens of thousands of Canadians will receive very significant awards.
This is the result of a legal battle that's been going on for decades. The Quebec class action lawsuit was filed in 1998 involving smokers that got seriously sick or couldn't quit. The plaintiffs won the case in 2015. It just took this long for the potential payout because the companies were seeking creditor protection. If this proposed plan is accepted, the plaintiffs would file claims for compensation up to $100,000 each. But many of the class action members have died already, so their successors will be eligible for the compensation.
Obviously, our loved ones won't come back from the dead, but at least it gives us some kind of justice, some kind of closure.
The proposed plan also includes more than $25 billion for provinces and territories recouping health costs, as well as $2.5 billion for smokers in other provinces diagnosed with some cancers between 2015 and 2019. It must be voted on by creditors no later than December 12th and approved by the court. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Montreal.
Joe Biden is repeating hopes that Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar's death will lead to a Gaza ceasefire. But from Hamas, there was defiance. And as Briar Stewart reports, Israel says it vows the war will go on.
Smoke rises from northern Gaza as the Israeli military says this is a unit preparing to head into the city of Jabalia. The death of Hamas's leader, Yahya Sinwar, might have achieved a key Israeli goal in this war, but it didn't end it. The families of the hostages wish it did.
This moment becomes something if it's leveraged to bring the hostages home.
Abion's cousin, Ofer Calderon, is still trapped in Gaza. His 2 children were released in the temporary truce last fall. His son made this video pleading for his dad's freedom.
It's an awful, awful situation that has gone on here for more than 370 days. We can end this. We need 100 hostages home now.
But there aren't any signs an agreement is close. A Hamas official warns that the hostages will only be released once imprisoned Palestinians are freed and the Israeli military withdraws from Gaza. There in the city of Han Yunis, a videographer working for CBC News filmed Friday prayers at a destroyed mosque. Many have publicly hailed Sinwar as a martyr. But this man also says now it's time for Hamas to negotiate. Another says the blame rests with Israel. All of the stubbornness is on its side, he says.
This is not the end of the war in Gaza.
Israel's prime minister says the country will continue to root out militants unless they put down their weapons and release the hostages.
You argued for so long that Sinwar prevents a deal.
The security expert says he would like to believe that Sinwar's death will be enough for Benjamin Netanyahu to negotiate.
So do you think that this is enough for him, that this victory is enough?
No, I don't. But I'm afraid that his list of priorities is somewhat different.
On that list, the complete destruction of Hamas, still fighting in what's left of Gaza. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Canada has detailed a $65 million military aid package for Ukraine, part of $500 million pledged last July. The announcement was made at the NATO Defense Ministers Summit.
We spoke a great deal about NATO's strong and united resolve to support Ukraine as it defends itself against Russia's unprovoked and illegal invasion, and we remain all collectively committed to more than ever to this support, and we will continue to do more to help Ukrainians in their courageous fight.
The Canadian package includes small arms, ammunition, and training. Still to come, why a supposed trip of a lifetime for Indigenous youth in Canada left participants feeling scammed. That's next. It was supposed to be a trip of a lifetime, a program focused on giving Indigenous youth in Canada a chance to make cultural connections with Maori in New Zealand, but it left them feeling scammed. CBC's Indigenous reporter Jackie McKay explains.
It promised an immersive experience, living and working in Maori communities. But instead, participants were left short on cultural opportunities and cash.
I do feel scammed.
I was just really disappointed by the whole experience.
The companies that ran the program, Go International out of Vancouver and New Zealand's Genza. Go International charged $4,200 for the program. Participants had to pay for flights, insurance, and visas. Promises included taking part in a Maori welcome and visiting a Maori village.
There's no way we got what the itinerary said or anything like that.
Bear said the deep cultural experiences were nothing more than tourist hotspots.
It wasn't like what I had expected because, like when you talk about culture and stuff, like it's not like a tourist thing.
After the first 2 weeks, things got worse. The group ended up at a remote lodge with no way to leave and working for room and board.
It's less than ideal. We're not getting paid.
Next, they expected to be on a Kiwi farm, but it was a packing plant.
You would just stare at this machine for 12 hours.
Some of those shifts were overnight.
Back to work. Cheryl and I were working on the grading machine, and we were both got so dizzy that we both ended up throwing up.
Their rooms were bug and rodent infested too.
There was a mouse in our bedroom, and I was so terrified to sleep that night.
In response to a concerned parent, Go International said the group confused harmless clicker bugs with rodent droppings. The program promised they would make 750 New Zealand dollars a week, about 636 Canadian, but pay stubs show an average of 338 New Zealand dollars. That's about 282 Canadian. Hundreds were deducted each check for taxes, rent, and transportation. In a statement, Genza said errors were made in preparing participants, and consultations with Maori were inadequate. In an email, Go International said the high standards it set for the trip were not met, and that while most of the participants had the experience that we had hoped for, some did not. Many people left the program early, like Stevens. She's still in New Zealand.
I just think I wasted a lot of money on that program to not receive what I asked for and what was guaranteed.
The people we spoke to asked for a full refund. Go International offered $600 and confirmed the program has been discontinued. Jackie McKay for CBC Indigenous in Vancouver.
Darius Madavi is back with our 5-day forecast. Darius?
Well, we've got a lot more moisture feeding into the province. We're going to continue to see that rain. We're seeing a lot of snow right now across parts of the province, especially at those higher elevations and up in the north, although you can't see that here. We do still have that snow warning in place up in the northeast. But with that being said, over the next 24 hours or so, freezing levels are expected to come up. Temperatures are coming up as well, so we'll see less snow and more rain over as that period continues. But again, we are now starting to see that moisture move further and further, closer and closer to Vancouver, which is where we're expecting to see, especially in the North Shore Mountains, a decent amount of impact. Over 100 millimeters is very much possible for some of these areas, even up to 120 millimeters or so. You can see the totals we have so far, and again, they are highest, almost 100 millimeters on the west coast of Vancouver Island for now, but West Vancouver is starting to head up as we start to see that rain intensify in some places, and that will only continue. We still have those flood watches in place. We have those high stream flow advisories. Here you can see the amount of rain that is expected to come in over the next few hours across the lower mainland. And you'll see, again, mostly concentrated up on the mountains, but a decent amount may come down to lower elevations as well. Now you can see it here. If we zoom out to the south coast, again, a lot of water feeding in, a lot of rain is expected in many areas. And you'll also notice, again, although we had some snow earlier today on some of the mountaintops, now it's expected to mostly be rain because, again, we've got some warmer air coming into the province as well. So the really chilly temperatures we've had are expected to come up, although they are expected to return. Those temperatures in the negatives or highs in the negative for the central interior, the northern interior, as we get into Sunday. So a bit of a rise tomorrow and then a drop on Sunday. The south, though, maintaining those slightly warmer temperatures, at least until Monday. And again, still a decent amount of snow coming to some areas, even as we see those freezing levels rise. In terms of total accumulations, we're still looking at a fairly decent amount in many spots. Expect to see, again, a lot of rain come down. Clear your gutters, clear your storm drains. Just get ready for a decent amount of rain. Landslides are possible on parts of the island and some more remote areas, but not expecting to see too much of an impact. Really hoping for that at least. And make sure that you are being careful if you're taking any of those roads, taking any of those highway passes or mounted passes on the highways, because again, we've got a significant rainfall event. It is a atmospheric river, Pineapple Express, I guess we could call it, because hopefully it won't be too intense that we have to go with the term atmospheric river. But generally, once we get out of the weekend, we've got some more sunshine. So once again, Janella, something for everybody.
Well, Darius, before you go, guess what time it is? Now, Darius, you're going to tell us a little bit of a special Fun Fact Friday, something called the birthday paradox. Why is that?
Yes, and I was thinking about the birthday paradox because, Janella, as you know, there are a number of birthdays happening in our newsroom today. There are 3 people who we work with quite closely who have birthdays today. I know there are 6 presents. I couldn't remove the extra ones, but we've got a decent number of birthdays. You can see the special birthday people here. There's Renee and Megan. She wanted me to tell you she's doing makeup. I just couldn't fit it on the board. And this is Yasmin. And so I was thinking about the birthday paradox, which is poorly named because it's not actually a paradox, but the birthday problem suggests how many people, it asks how many people do you need to have in a room to have a 50% chance of 2 of those people sharing a birthday. And you'd expect 365 days in a year, you'd probably need a big number of people to have a 50% chance, you know, a 50-50 chance of having 2 people with the same birthday. So how many do you need? Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 100? Because again, 365 days is a lot. But in reality, it's actually only, this looks like a lot of people, but only 23 people that you need in order to have that 50-50 chance, 1 in 2 chance of having 2 people share a birthday, which when I heard this, sounded counterintuitive, didn't sound real, but you can see here the chances increase very quickly when you have a large number of people, and 23, that's actually the 50% mark. So there you go, fun tidbit.
Well, that is a very special one for us today. Thanks so much, Darius.
Thank you.
Still to come, a look at one BC man's backyard renovation built to help a very special visitor. That's next.
Are you ready to vote?
Make an informed decision when you cast your ballot.
We're covering the issues that matter to you.
Housing and childcare.
The education system. Climate change.
Unemployment.
Just general affordability.
Public transport.
CBC is your home for provincial election coverage. Don't miss our election night special, October 19th. BC Votes 2024, streaming on CBC.
Preparations for this year's Lights of Hope at St. Paul's Hospital are set to begin tomorrow, with 150 volunteers helping put up the grand display that helps raise money to support patients across BC.
We have thousands of lights, actually, with 150 stars and over 150 people who have volunteered their time in this horrible weather to get those stars up. And it's all to help us raise money so we can provide better care for people who are in the hospital.
Volunteers will be setting up the display until November 27th. The lights will stay on through the holiday season until the new year.
Well, it's a home renovation that could only happen in BC. A North Vancouver family took it upon themselves to install an extra large doggy door to help bears pass through their yard.
About 5 weeks ago, we had a new fence put in, an 8-footer. You can see it in the pictures. And then 2 or 3 days later, my wife and I are watching Netflix, and all of a sudden the panels just start disappearing.
Kurt Shuey says he and his wife were watching TV one night when they noticed the panels of their new fence disappearing.
He says bears frequent his yard when traveling to the nearby river, and that while the idea of building the bear a door started as a joke, the bear took it seriously.
And then it took about 2 weeks. Got up one morning and there was the footage, and the bear just came down the driveway, walked right through like he'd done it a million times, and we were floored.
Shiwi says he likes the bears and is happy to help them cut down on their commute, but also wants to be safe and responsible.
That is way cuter than I was expecting.
It's pretty ingenious.
Yeah. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
I'll have your next local news at 11 o'clock right after the National. Have a great night.